Imagine a guy who's got a stake in companies that had to pay millions because they got caught cheating Medicare and Medicaid. Then this same guy becomes the top federal official in charge of fighting COVID and working with social media companies to decide what people can say online. Oh, and he somehow got a job on Facebook's board right when Facebook desperately needed someone who understood how government works during their huge privacy scandal. Plus, he approved using a robot to sign hundreds of presidential pardons, including but not limited to Anthony Fauci. And if this sounds crazy, that's because it is. But it's also perfectly legal and shows exactly how the system really works. This is the actual career of Jeff Zients, the Revolving Doors Hall of Fame inductee. Jeff Zients made his fortune by investing in healthcare companies that took care of sick people, but in a really sneaky way. His company, Portfolio Logic, bought businesses that provided medical care to vulnerable families, kids with disabilities, elderly people, and families dealing with medical emergencies. But here's the trick. These companies figured out how to charge the government through Medicare and Medicaid as much money as possible for their services. They use something called aggressive billing practices, which is a fancy way of saying that they found creative ways to ask for more money than they probably needed. It's like if you were selling lemonade and found a way to charge people twice just for the plastic cup. And that is basically what these companies did with the medical care. They would charge the government for taking care of patients, then find ways to charge extra fees on top of that. The families using these services were perfect targets because they were overwhelmed. When your kid needs a breathing machine to stay alive, you're not exactly checking every medical bill for mistakes. You're just trying to keep your child healthy and alive. In 2015, one of Zients' companies, PSA Healthcare, got caught. They had to pay almost $7 million to the government to settle accusations that they were billing for things incorrectly. So PSA took care of kids with serious conditions like spina bifida and cerebral palsy, children who needed nurses at home 24/7 to survive. These families were exhausted and completely dependent on PSA to keep their kids alive. Just think about that. So the company said that they didn't do anything wrong, but they still paid millions of dollars to make the problem go away. Yeah, it's like getting caught cheating on a test and saying, I was not cheating, while quietly paying the teacher, a good amount of dosh to forget about that. Zients owned part of PSA and sat on their board during this time, so he directly benefited from whatever shady billing practices were making all that money. But now, in March 2028, Facebook got in huge trouble for the Cambridge Analytica scandal. This was when everyone found out that Facebook let a sketchy company steal personal information from 87 million users without asking. And just 2 months later, guess who got hired to Facebook's board? Jeff Zients. Specifically, he became the chair of the Audit and Risk Oversight Committee, which was basically the group that was supposed to watch for trouble. This timing is like being hired as the head of food safety at a restaurant chain right after everyone got food poisoning. Either you're a very brave or you know something that others don't. So Zients brought something valuable to Facebook. He knew how the government worked because he had worked in the Obama administration. So when Facebook faced investigations and had to pay a record $5 billion fine, Zients could help them navigate the system. And in 2024, some Facebook shareholders accused Zients and others of deleting emails related to the Cambridge Analytica lawsuit. And a court said that there was not enough evidence to punish Zients, but it shows how these corporate cleanup jobs work. Now, while working at another company called Crane Group, Zients bought North Star Anesthesia in 2018. And this company works in an industry famous for surprise billing. And here's how surprise billing works. You go to a hospital that takes your insurance. You use a surgeon who takes your insurance. But then you find out that the anesthesiologist, the person who puts you to sleep for surgery, doesn't take your insurance. So you get a huge, unexpected bill for thousands of dollars. It's like being mugged while you're unconscious, except it's completely legal and the mugger has a medical degree. You thought everything was covered, but surprise! Here's a massive bill you never saw coming. So this practice specifically targets people when they're most vulnerable. Sounds familiar? Yeah, he already did that before. When they are sick, scared, and can't shop around for better prices. Then, when Biden became president, he decided the best person to handle COVID was someone whose healthcare experience involved owning companies that paid millions in fraud settlements. Zients became the COVID-19 response coordinator. And this was interesting because Zients had to work with private companies to fight the pandemic. The government was basically partnering with the same types of business Zients used to own and profit from. And one of his biggest moves was the vaccine mandate for large employers. Instead of the government directly forcing people to get vaccinated, Zients suggested that companies with more than 100 employees require their workers to get vaccinated or tested. It was turning every HR department in America into government health police. And in January 2025, a news came out that Zients approved using an Autopen, the robot that reproduces signatures, to sign clemency orders or pardons for Biden. You know that Autopen is like having someone else vote for you in an election. The signature is technically real, but the person it belongs to wasn't directly involved in each decision. Well, in fact, Biden wasn't directly involved in whatever was happening around him. But reports say that Zients approved using this machine for hundreds or possibly thousands of last-minute pardons. And one of those pardons was to Anthony Fauci, who I think is a guy who should be prosecuted for crimes against humanity like yesterday. So, Jeff Zients has mastered the art of moving between making money in private business and making policy in government. He reminds me of that video about Pam Bondi and Susie Wiles I did a couple days ago. Make sure that you watch it. But in private business, he invested in companies that found clever ways to extract maximum money from government programs meant to help vulnerable people. In government, he created policies that involved working closely with private companies who would in turn benefit from working with the government. The reality is that, same with Bondi and Wiles, none of this is technically illegal. Zients has simply figured out how to be in the right place at the right time to benefit from the system's weaknesses. Let's call this the corporate American dream. Find the gaps in the system, exploit them legally, and move seamlessly between the private companies that profit from these gaps and the government agencies that regulate them. This system works because it maintains the appearance that we have both fair market competition and democratic accountability. What a joke. While making sure that neither poses a real threat to the people who benefit most from the current arrangement. But I would like to know what you think about this in the comments. Here's the Pam Bondi and Susie Wiles video, just in case you haven't watched it. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the Power Pundit. Much love and bliss.